So you're a streamer. That means three things. One, you are infected with the brain rot that is constant streams and trend chasing. It will consume all of us in the end. Two, you're plagued with depression, ADHD, and perhaps some more flavorful mental afflictions. Happens to the best of us, really. And three, you value your privacy. But even with everything in your corner, things like VPNs, malwarebytes, good antiviruses, and a professional poison sniffer for the anthrax in your PO box, there's still one thing that can get you in the end. Your OS. With end of support coming soon for Windows 10 and all the useless applications they're pushing for 11, you may want to take matters into your own hands and jump ship. Now I know what you're thinking. But DJ, I know Windows. Mac doesn't have any games and... Wasn't there a third one? Yes, there is. Well, there's a lot of them really, and some are crazier than others, but don't you worry. When it comes to complex systems, you've got an engineer in your corner. Welcome to The Streamer's Guide to Linux. Now, this is going to be a pretty long video, so I've taken the liberty of breaking it up into pieces for you. For those of you who are looking for specific information or want to jump around over the course of a few months humming and hawing about it, like me, then I'm sure it'll come in handy. Now, the first thing we got to talk about is a simple one. Why Linux? Whether you're here for your own reasons or watching just out of curiosity, it's an honest question. After all, not everyone's paying attention to what's happening with their operating system, and some have never questioned what one is. Let's pretend for a second that macOS doesn't exist. A pretty easy thing to do under most circumstances, as unless you're running Apple hardware, chances are that Mac isn't even on your radar. When left with Windows versus Linux, we've got a lot of pros and cons to consider. So let's look at a few. When you really stop and look around you, Windows seems to just about control the world of computing from the outside perspective. Programs are widely built in and made for Windows. Any old exe file can be downloaded and run like there's nothing to it at all. But this is a double-edged sword. Because of its widespread nature and click-and-play functionality, it's the easiest target for malware and viruses. You can mitigate this with antiviruses and programs like Malwarebytes, of course, but they can only ever respond to threats that already exist. When it comes to the user interface, of course, Windows being Windows, computers have been running it for over 30 years. I'd be hard-pressed to find a single person who has used a computer and never loaded up Windows. And the overall design has changed very little over the years. Still start menu, taskbar, action center, everything in its... Oh. Right. That. This is where we start getting into the weeds a bit. Windows 11. For those that don't know, as of October 2025, Microsoft will no longer put out regular security updates to Windows 10 unless you pay a fee. A clear sign that they're trying to push everyone onto Windows 11. This happened with 7 as well, and even if 11 truly is the last version as they say, it's not a good look for the company. Now, this would all be well and good, a new update, new look, if not for some of the more controversial things coming with 11, namely Microsoft Recall and Copilot. Now, why are these controversial and considered invasive? Well, Copilot is easy to see when you look at all the discourse online with AI in general. We as a user base haven't been so fond of AI assistants. Be honest, when was the last time you heard of someone using Cortana? You forgot she existed, didn't you? We all forgot she existed. As for Recall, it runs a little bit deeper. It's marketed as a way to find anything you've seen on your PC, and it does this by periodically capturing what you're doing to save for later searches. Let that sink in a minute. And then ask yourself, hey, what if it captures passwords or bank information? Because that's the same question we all ask. And before you ask, Microsoft has confirmed themselves that no, Recall will not be optional. It will be disabled by default, but having such a privacy risk of a program on my computer just freaks me out. Now, in the laundry list of things that people are complaining about with 11, this one's not actually as widely contested as I'd have thought, but in my opinion, it should be. In Windows 11, advertisements are being placed on your very desktop, from your start menu to your action center, your notifications, all over the place. Granted, you can turn a lot of them off in settings, but you also sacrifice some functionality in doing so, as well as having them active by default. Honestly, considering the pushback on YouTube and their unskippable 30-minute ads, I feel like we really should be more angry about having ads pushed in our faces from the moment we power on the computer. But maybe I'm just old school and not as hip and happening with the times. As for Teen Penguin, we got good news and bad news. While programs like Wine, Bottle, and Valve's Proton architecture have made great strides into compatibility for Linux, a lot of things still simply do not work for it. Not recommended for Adobe Creative Suite subscribers. Because everyone seems to run on Windows, however, and Linux is broken up in about 100 or so different kinds, a lot of hackers and malicious programs will simply pass Linux by. So long as you don't run strange commands in your terminal, for the most part, you'll be alright. Though there are plenty of Linux versions with their own unique way of doing things, there's also plenty more with a more familiar look to it. We'll get into some of these further into the video, don't you worry. You may have noticed me say versions. That's because unlike Windows, where one is clearly newer and more feature-rich than the other, Linux has many choices. Pick whichever flavor suits you and your needs best. Free and open source is the name of the game with Linux, and that's no lie. You grab a distro for free, the whole community adds to it, and there's no big corporation deciding to cash in on selling you out. Yeah, I know, it's funny putting this here when we're comparing it to the literal biggest OS in the world. Hear me out for a second. Whenever you're launching into something new, it's important to have others help you find your footing. Thankfully, most Linux community members are more than happy to do just that, and love when fresh faces join the good fight. Now, if you thought I'd just sit here and sing the Penguin's praises for the rest of the video, then you don't know me. Notice that I said most Linux community members. That's because, like every group of people on the internet, there's a vocal group no one wants to mention. There are a lot of self-important elitists peppered into the Linux community, and the concentration kind of depends on which type of Linux you're using. Thankfully, the more beginner-friendly ones are much kinder in community, but if you move to more complex ones, you may find much more of this. Now, while it's true that a lot of things on Linux can be done through the user interface just like Windows, there will always be at least a couple of things that are better done in the terminal, Linux's command line and direct path to the heart of the OS. Copy-pasting well-documented commands to do simple things is all well and good, but anything deeper will require some deep diving into new knowledge. For those of us more used to Windows or even Mac, we've grown more or less accustomed to things working as intended, and glitches being a result of some major fuck-up on our end. Linux is a different beast. Everything is a little more experimental, and thus said fuck-ups need not be so big to break things. With a bit of luck, some perseverance, and a generous scoop of chutzpah, you can get it done, but it won't usually be so simple and easy. Alright, managed to catch all that? Haven't scared you off yet? Wonderful. Now I know that was a bit of an info dump, but as thrilling as an expedition into a new OS sounds, it's not a decision to take lightly. It's a bit like moving to a new town. You have to figure out where, make sure your job can transfer you, find if your favorite burger place is a location nearby, panic when they don't, reckon with the fact that no other burger will ever hit the same, then pack your stuff and go. You know, simple stuff like that. Now this is the point where we've got to explain something about Linux that you don't really deal with when it comes to Windows or Mac. Distros. Brief history. Linux was made by this dude, Linus Torvalds. He's a tech-savvy dude who wanted to make his own OS, and since it was the 90s and it was the style at the time, he went and did it. After some tweaking to the core systems, a shiny new GNU license, and an entire slew of open source devs on his side, he had enough to launch his own multitasking OS. A Unix. Linus is Unix. Oh, so that's where it gets the name. Now, Linux by itself doesn't really do much. Contrary to popular belief, Linux isn't an operating system. It's what's called a kernel. Hold on a sec, you say. Why am I putting popcorn in my PC again? Well, for one, don't do that. Melted butter is not good for electronics. And two, different kind of kernel. See, in terms of computers, a kernel is the heart of an OS, being sort of a translator between the hardware and the programs. But you kind of need more than that. Things like a desktop, file system, wallpapers, settings that do nothing. No, wait, scratch that one, that's a terrible idea. For everything else, you need what is commonly referred to as a desktop environment. Makes enough sense, it's the environment containing your desktop. This is the part that has the buttons and the bars and the fancy wallpapers and... Man, they should make a name for this. Oh, except they have. UI, user interface. We've mentioned it before, you might remember. When it comes to UI, just as we see for Mac, Windows, iOS, or Android, there's a lot of different things you can do to change the experience. So with Linux needing a coat of paint and probably some walls, people went off and made their own. They popped them into neat little packages and distributed them for others to use, like some kind of a distribution package. You know, while we're naming things, we should think of a good one for this too. While I do that, why don't we break the VTuber mold for a second and step outside? These days, the first step to getting into Linux is heading to your local Baskin-Robbins and finding which flavor is right for you. This is also what gets most people to swear off ice cream, but the best option in each scenario is just to ask the people in the store for their opinions. If you really want to find the one that'll suit your needs best, you need a Linux buddy who can listen to what you need and recommend something that does it all. Of course, if all that's a bit too daunting right off the bat, we've got the Neapolitan Special, as there's a few distros that come highly recommended to newcomers: Linux Mint, Pop! OS, and Fedora. There are plenty more, of course, and you should always do plenty of research and testing to see what's right for you, but let's tackle these three first. First, we have Pop! OS. Each one of the three have their use cases, and this one caters to that most represented faction in streaming. No, not reaction channels. Gamers. With proprietary drivers for NVIDIA GPUs and direct support for Steam, this distro has been designed with gaming in mind. Probably helps that System76, the developers of Pop! OS, also make PCs that ship with their distro pre-installed. Gives a bit of an edge when considering hardware. The UI is very intuitive and easy to use as well. It's a bit different compared to Windows or even Mac, but you can get the hang of it pretty quickly. Installing it's a breeze too, having an install process much like Windows. Just pop the installer on a USB drive, boot from that, and it gives you a little look at the distro before you even install it. That's right, you can run this from a flash drive. And if that sounds well and good, but you like some more concrete instructions, System76 has you covered there too. There's an entire user manual for Pop! OS on how to use its variety of functions. More accurate than I could ever hope to be. Probably more entertaining too, come to think of it. Next up, we've got Linux Mint, often just referred to as Mint. If you're more of a casual user on Team Red for your GPU, or just don't do a lot of hardcore gaming, this might be your cup of tea. Get it? Mint, tea, and I think you get it. First point in its favor is actually a one-up it has over Pop! OS. Mint's UI is much more like Windows. You got a start menu, familiar taskbar, even the action buttons on the right. It's like going back to the good old days of Windows 7 before Microsoft started letting us down. Next, for the desktop environment, you've still got options. There's Cinnamon, feature-rich, modern, widely customizable. You've got Mate, more familiar but less options. And finally, there's XFCE, which is lightweight and stable, but a bit more power user. Now, since Mint and Pop! OS are built on Ubuntu, they share a lot of similarity on usability. Easy to install, a lovely user manual, and even a wiki, and they even share a lot of very useful programs. Makes it real easy to find whatever you need. Finally, we've got Mint's biggest benefit, its community. With so many users willing to help each other, it's a good chance there's an answer to just about any question you could have. And last but not least, we've got the dark horse. When compiling this list, Pop! OS and Mint were easy contenders, but it took a bit of consideration before finally landing on Fedora. Let's talk about why we did. In much the same way as the previous two, Fedora has a user-friendly UI, great support from the community, and excellent documentation. Unlike the others, however, Fedora stays on the cutting edge. If you constantly want the latest and greatest, this distro will keep you in the loop for ages to come. Another point in its favor is how compatible it is. Fedora is designed to be compatible with proprietary software and hardware, making it easier to run things that would normally only work for Windows or Mac. And last but not least, the real selling point. Pop! OS is for gamers, Mint is for casuals, but Fedora takes you deeper down the rabbit hole. This distro takes the whole free and open source shtick and runs with it, full tilt. Fedora is a fantastic starting point for anyone who wants to learn how to better contribute to Linux, even being able to contribute directly to Fedora itself. If you want to learn how to make a better Linux, this is your bag. In addition to these, there's probably a few more names you should know in the Linux space, big players who are loved or hated by everyone they see. Don't worry, we won't get in depth with these, just a quick primer for familiarity, so the hyper nerds don't out you as a casual. First, we have Arch Linux, or just Arch. Arch is widely beloved by the people who use it in much the same way that iPhones are widely beloved by those that use them. It's also considered one of the most complex and daunting challenges for any Linux user to properly utilize, being heavy on terminal usage and commands. After that, there's CentOS. Fun fact, this is one of the most widely used, as a lot of servers run on this. It's also discontinued. Won't stop people from loving it though. I should also mention Debian, which is often said in the same breath as Ubuntu for standard options. Not as beginner friendly, but considered to be much more stable and customizable. Really a pick your poison moment. Now, you may well have been rolling your eyes through the first part, thinking me a believer that this is a sure thing. But DJ, you say with practiced grace, what about all my programs? I need my Microsoft Outlook or I'll miss all of my important emails. This is the part that will either terrify or excite you. Compatibility. A surprising amount of programs these days are natively supported, meaning they're first-hand made to work with Linux and in some cases work better. There are even certain programs that others have gone through the effort to disassemble and rebuild with Linux compatibility in mind. And you laughed at me for saying community was a big selling point. Of course, certain programs are centered on the OS and can't be ported over no matter what we do. Think things like the aforementioned Outlook, Xbox app, that type of thing. Sorry, no Game Pass here. For artists and thumbnail editors, we have Inkscape and GIMP, good alternatives to stuff like Illustrator and Photoshop. I actually use GIMP on both Windows and Linux and can confirm it's faster on Linux. When it comes to video editing, you can always shop around, but my personal favorite is DaVinci Resolve. Professional grade capability for absolutely free. It's actually what I'm using right now. How's it going up there? As for the actual streaming or recording, never fear. OBS itself is supported outright, so the vast majority will have no issues. For VTubers like me, however, it can get a little complicated. If you're also a member of the peasantry and track yourself with a webcam, then know that you have to track with something natively supported, as most workarounds don't really play nice with lines of communication or hardware. On the other hand, if you drank the Kool-Aid, bought an iPhone, and used that, you should be pretty fine. Even normally incompatible software can be made to work through Steam, and no need to worry about all that pesky communication. Note that I say through Steam, because when it comes to Linux support, Valve is truly the GOAT. Bit of background, Linux doesn't like Windows. It doesn't like its exe files, doesn't like the way it does things, doesn't like the laser window wallpaper, it's kind of grumpy about it all the time. So in an effort to run Windows programs on Linux, we gotta hit the bottle. No, really, there's a program called Wine that's been used for ages to do this. Think of it like the compatibility setting for older programs, but it makes the new stuff run too. A lot of programs that don't run on Linux can still be run through Wine or other compatibility software like Lutris or Bottle. There's no real exhaustive list of what can and can't, and sometimes your best bet is just to look up program name then Linux to see if other people have had any luck with it, as well as get tips and tricks on how to get things running. Now, our Lord and Savior Gaben looked at this and thought, hey, that's pretty neat. We should do something like that, one with our first-party devices operating on a Linux distro and all. So they did. Proton, built from Wine, is the main reason that so many games and programs on Steam can run on the Steam Deck, and consequently, Linux. This also means most of your games are going nowhere at all. Mind you, Proton doesn't work for absolutely everything. However, there is a handy website you can use that can show you which games do, which don't, and even scan your library to tell you the difference. Now, one problem we run into is, when it comes to games, Gaben and Wine won't always be there to save us. As a matter of fact, there's a bunch that in current understanding will just never work on Linux. That's because these games use what's called a kernel anti-cheat. Now, not all are made equal. Helldivers 2 will work while others like League of Legends or Valorant won't. That's because certain anti-cheat measures want to talk directly to the Windows kernel. Now obviously if you're running Linux, then it can't do that, shocker, I know. Sometimes an anti-cheat will have ways around that, and sometimes they'll even be supported by the devs. But there's also a lot more that the devs have explicitly stated they will not add Linux support for. Matter of fact, there's a helpful website that can tell you whether or not anti-cheat will break some more popular games in regards to Linux. Sadly, over half of them are either broken or outright denied, such as Fortnite, PUBG, Rainbow Six Siege, and Rust. But it's always better to know, and that still leaves half that are at least playable. Now, some of you may be worried about how to perform such a Herculean feat as installing Linux. You may have seen some people installing Arch and going through 100 lines of code just to make it work, but I guarantee you that it's more in line with installing Windows than any of that. Needless to say, I'm not going to leave you twisting in the wind, so let's go over it together. There are really 3 ways to run any OS, and Linux is no different. Virtual machine, dual boot, and just full sending it. Each one is a new level of commitment and each has their own perks, so let's go on a few dates and see if we can find the one. Virtual machines like VirtualBox essentially take a small part of your computer's available power, put it in a box, and act like it's a new computer. Doing this gives a variety of benefits, like safeguarding files from malware, malicious programs, and you can open your little Russian nesting PC whenever you like to look inside. No problem. Not without its faults though. Remember, it's only using a part of your computer's power, so you're not running Crysis on this thing. Also, a lot of OSs don't like to play too nice on VMs, so they may give weird glitches you have to troubleshoot. If you're just using it to familiarize yourself with the layout and general user experience of an OS, it's a very good and safe first option. After that is dual booting. Just as the name implies, this gives your computer the ability to boot into 2 or more OSs at launch. Now, if your PC has the storage space to dual boot, then it's a fantastic way to find out how it runs on bare metal, or straight from your hardware as normal. It'll act just like any OS, cause it kind of is. It's able to utilize your CPU, your graphics card, and your RAM to their fullest extent, as well as any storage you give it to use. There are problems though. With VMs, you can switch your OS just by opening or closing the program, but in dual boot, you gotta power down your computer, access the boot options, choose to boot into the other LAN. Bit more involved. Also, know how I said if your PC has a storage space? Yeah, it's because you have to allocate storage to it. Essentially rope off an area of your hard drives with signs that say, no windows allowed from this point on, like you're trying to keep girls out of your treehouse. It's somewhat easier if you have multiple drives, as you can just rope off a whole drive, or take the slightly more advanced approach of partitioning, splitting the drive into chunks to dole out as you see fit. Be aware though, whichever way you choose, you want to move any important files from the drive before allocating. It's kind of like building a skyscraper on a plot of land that a house is on. Gotta clear the way first. Wait, hold on, bring that back. There is one more point. Make sure that any files you want to bring over to the other OS, be it save games, documents, photos, or your job resume, you never know, Google might call back, you put them on a flash drive or external disk of some kind. Once you pop over to Linux, you can't read the files on the Windows side and vice versa. Now you can erase it. Now that you have a good idea of what you're getting into as well as how to get in, let's see how you actually pull the trigger. So first you want to keep your finger off it until you're ready to fire, be aware of your target and what's behind it, and I may have the wrong script here. 1 second. I know it's in here somewhere. Where is it? Is that my tax forms? Is that last year's tax forms? Well, one quick trip to the financial department later and we're ready to install. Now, for the sake of simplicity on my end, I'm going to do all the installs on a virtual machine. It's for illustrative purposes and I don't intend to run all of them. For context, the install process should be largely the same for bare metal with a little more prep for your installation media. Don't worry, I'll show you that too, as well as how to set your VN for Linux. So let's talk about setup. Whether you're doing bare metal or VM, there's some light prep work to do. Don't worry about links, they'll all be in the down below as well. First off, you want to grab the ISO files for your distro. We'll show you what to do for the Neapolitan special here. Pop! OS can be retrieved from pop.system76.com. Just click the download, select whether you want the base distro, the one for NVIDIA GPUs specifically, or Raspberry Pi for some reason. Though, truth be told, if you're installing Pop! OS on a Raspberry Pi, you probably don't need instructions. Thanks for stopping by anyway. Mint is located at linuxmint.com. Easy. Click Download and select your desktop environment. Take note of the install instructions for later. I'm going with Cinnamon. Scroll down the page a bit and you can find many mirrors to download from. This is familiar to perusers of totally legitimate online storefronts. But for anyone else, just choose a mirror that's in or close to your country. They all have the same thing. Fedora can be found at fedoraproject.org. Just click the big latest release button in the center of the screen. Looks a little confusing, but you want the Fedora workstation. Other bits have other uses, but you can figure them out on your own, should you choose to. If you're going the VN route, relatively easy. First step is to select a virtual machine. I use the Oracle VirtualBox. I'm sure there's better ones, but we do what we can with what we have. Hop over to virtualbox.org. Wow, we're lucking out with the links, huh? And click Download. After that, just select your platform on the left. We're going for Windows hosts. Save the installer, run the installer. If you're doing bare metal, however, the process is a bit more involved. For Pop! OS and Mint, as well as most other distros, you'll need a program called Etcher. And for Fedora, you actually have a Fedora Media Writer you can get from the same place as the ISO. Of course, if you are doing bare metal, no matter which one you use, you'll also need a sufficiently sized flash drive or external media you can clear out and use as a bootable drive. Alright, now we got the ingredients, cutlery, recipe, just have to preheat. We doing this on the grill or in the oven? Let's say the oven is virtual machine because it's all contained in a little box we can open at any time and has the propensity to melt our face off when we do. Well, I thought it was apt. So first stop is launching your VM software. You make yourself a profile, easy as can be. Point it over to the ISO you downloaded for your selected distro. And you're good to go. Now, a couple of notes on your install settings. Most of it can be customized to your liking, or just left alone, but these two are very particular. First off, it's recommended for any of these distros to be run with no less than 4 GB, or 4096 megabytes, of RAM on the VM. Makes sense since that's what they recommend for bare metal too. This does mean that your computer needs more than 4 GB of RAM to do this, as you do still need to run, your primary OS and VM software. Second, you need to make sure to enable the EFI setting here. This goes for all 3 distros being shown and, to my knowledge, any other distro. Let's not question why, just give the machine gods their due and pray for a bountiful harvest. Finally, you can just run from the virtual machine, complete the install process, which we'll show in a bit, and browse to your heart's content. Now, do be aware that your install may seem to hang sometimes, like mine. If you've got it installed on a slower drive, like an old hard disk, then just give it a bit. Takes old bones a minute to get up and kicking. And apparently I would know in the VTubing community. Let's also say that the grill is bare metal for reasons that should be obvious. No, it's not for developing a crust. And no, it doesn't matter whether we're using charcoal or propane here. Yes, I watched King of the Hill too. Just trust me, okay? First, you're going to want to pop your distro of choice onto a flash drive. But you can't just slap it on there like loading Halo onto school computers. You'd still do that, right? Instead, you have to set it up a certain way. This is where Etcher and the Fedora Media Writer come in. First off, of course, plug your flash drive in. Make sure any important files, homework, or standalone games are off of it, as these programs are pretty indiscriminate with space. For Pop! OS, Mint, and just about every other distro, you're going to open up Etcher. It's a simple matter of flash from file, give it your ISO, select your USB drive, and flash. Once a new age of man has passed, you've got a live media drive. For Fedora, open up the media writer. You can choose to use the ISO you downloaded or automatically download one from the writer. Something I didn't know while making this video, clearly. Choose the flash drive you want to write to. Accept that all your space belongs to Fedora. And now we wait. Quick note here, sometimes this method of media creation can be buggy on Windows machines specifically. It has to do with some sort of file Windows injects into it to make it readable in its file structure. If this is a problem for you too, then you want to use another program called Rufus. It works in much the same way. Show the way to the flash drive, point it to your ISO, give it a name if you like, and go. I know it looks like a lot of options, but most of them don't really need changing, so no need to worry on that front. And finally, all that's left to do is install the OS itself. This might seem reductive, but in all honesty, this part is by far the simplest. Just a bit of following on-screen instruction. Now, we mentioned security earlier, how you mostly don't need to worry about it because no one runs Linux, but question, what if they do? What if, say, the video goes viral and thousands of people start using Linux distros all at once? What about when the hackers and malefactors start porting bots over to make sense of Rust and come for all of us again? Well, even then, they'll still have a hell of a time with it. One final thing about Linux is, it has trust issues. I can relate. Windows is like a Labrador. It sees that you own the PC and gives you access to all the things, doesn't question, doesn't think twice, just sits and wags its tail as you delete the System32 folder to get more frames of Minecraft. Linux, however, is a well-trained shepherd. It trusts your commands, but it also knows when you're doing something dangerous. There's no System32 folder, but if there were, Linux would guard it with its life. This is because Linux users, unlike Windows, do not have full access to the kernel. The exact methodology is a little complicated, and I honestly don't get a lot of it myself, but the short version is that Windows gives you administrative access from the get-go, and Linux users have to go out of their way to do such things. In addition to that, there are other tools packed into what's known as the security kernel. Makes sense when you think about it. Firewalls with specialized filters, firmware verification on Secure Boot, lots of fancy toys that would make a cybersecurity specialist feel like a kid on Christmas. To sweeten the pot, a lot of programs are vetted before you even download them, as they come from signed repositories. This basically means that Linux knows where it all comes from, and any potential bad actors can be outed real quick. All that to say, Linux is pretty damn secure as it is, but if you want an antivirus on top of that, no one's really going to stop you. Well, except the antivirus itself, if they don't have a Linux package. That may or may not stop you depending on your brand loyalties. I put the word out for some time to everyone who wasn't already tired of my Linux spiel asking for questions or concerns, promising satisfaction at risk of some sort of 1700s era duel. This is the part where I prove that I need to retrain my aim a little more ahead of time. How do I play my favorite games without jumping through a ton of hoops to do it? Well, we've already gone over Steam, so that's no big thing, but for most of the rest, Lootrix may be your best friend. From itch.io to Epic, it's got some pretty damn good compatibility, so that should help you get as much of your library running as possible. How does Linux do with hardware drivers? For certain ones, certain distros come pre-packaged with them, like NVIDIA GPU drivers. For others, there's usually drivers on the manufacturer's website. If you've ever bought a drawing tablet and had to hunt down drivers, you know the process. What about websites that detect your OS? Okay, I didn't even know this actually happened before this question was brought up, but there are some answers. The cause for this, from what I've found, is a string on the server detecting a user agent that essentially rats you out. Add-ons like Chameleon for Chrome and User Agent String Switcher for Firefox can help with that. In cases where, say, a government agency wants to block access to anything but Internet Explorer, then I haven't found an answer as of yet. In the meantime, I'd recommend petitioning your government to get a calendar newer than 2004. Aren't there issues with Discord's screen share on Linux? If you only use the official Discord app, then this is an issue you can run into. However, if you run a custom client or use a community mod, you can fix those pesky audio issues. Technically against TOS, but if you don't tell, I won't tell. Hopefully Discord fixes the issue sooner rather than later and makes this point completely moot. Hey everyone, thanks for joining in with whatever this was. The whole point of it, honestly, was just to demystify the whole of Linux. I know that when I was younger, it was this big behemoth that was only available to like the hyper nerds out there. But it's actually much simpler than that these days, at the very least. And I think it's only really going to get simpler from here as more people use it. A quick note, this isn't just a guide for streamers. I know I call it the Streamer's Guide to Linux, but it's not just for them. If you're just going about your business, you can absolutely use this as a good primer on Linux stuff. I'm just tackling it from the point of view that I know best. Also, big thanks to Nate Pick, Elysian Castaic, Elaju, Faye Regalia, and to my beautiful wife for their assistance and support with this entire project. They were a great help. Also, many apologies to all my friends who have had to endure my inane Linux prattle for months upon months. I'm so sorry. As a note to anyone watching this video, I don't know everything about Linux. Linux is a huge thing. It is an absolute beast of a thing, and I can't possibly know everything about it. So take everything you see with a grain of salt. The information is subject to change. You know how it is. Hopefully, it still remains in spirit, at the very least, for a while to come, for anyone who wants to make this switch. If you are indeed interested in a follow-up video, then I would absolutely be down to do something like that. I'm actually loading up Pop! OS on my main computer to use. I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid, so to speak. So if you want to see something on how to properly use Linux, that might be a thing in the future. Just let me know. And of course, if you want to help support me in what I do, then come check out the Twitch. We do it live 5 times a week. It's a wonderful time, and I wish you could be here with us. And with all that being said, good luck, researchers, and may each experiment prove more favorable than the last.